Hola, hola. My name is Ricardo. I am the host of the Lucha Jovers podcast here in the Voices of Wrestling podcast network. We are a Spanish speaking show dedicated to discussing and analyzing pro wrestling from all across the world. From AW to CMLL, we talk about American wrestling, Japanese wrestling, and of course, Lucha Libre. If something big happened in the pro wrestling world, we will talk about it. So if you know Spanish or have a friend that knows Spanish or want to practice your lucha libre pronunciations, go listen to the Lucha Jovers podcast right here in the Voices of Wrestling podcast network. Nos vemos por ahí.
Hi, my name is Tyler Fornes, and I am the co-host of The Good, the Bad, and the Hunky here on the Voice Wrestling Podcasting Network. Every week, my co-host Fred Moreland and I discuss all the happenings of All Elite Wrestling and everything going on in the universe of Tony Khan. We talk about Dynamite, we talk about Rampage, and we will talk about Collision when the time comes as well, along with all the appearances outside of AEW from all the best talents in All Elite Wrestling. This is one of the more cohesive wrestling companies in the entire world, and we discuss every intricacy about it, including the unique booking of Tony Khan that is both a huge positive and a major detriment. Check us out every single Thursday here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome to Eurograps Express. I'm your host Neil David, and we are back once again to talk about all the exciting events of the British and European wrestling scene. And I have to say, it feels quite strange recording now. I don't know if you're going to notice a difference in this episode, but I like to record my podcasts in the middle of the night. I'm a bit of a nocturnal kind of person. I like to stay up till 2 a.m. on a Saturday and talk to the wardrobe with a microphone on my head. But I was out on Saturday night for the first time, and there's this thing in Manchester now, and I don't know if it's a worldwide thing. They probably have it in that London, but it's getting really popular, of like posh food courts. So the first one that I know of in Manchester was one called Mackie Mare, which is in the Northern Quarter. And you go to it, and it's sort of a big seating area in the middle. And all the way around it, there's different restaurant-level food, basically serving out of like a food court-style environment. So the idea is you can have your starter from one place, your main from another, your pudding from another. You can get your drinks, some drinks from a wine bar, some drinks from a cocktail bar, your coffee made by a proper coffee place, not someone trying to wing it, actual baristas. And if you fancy steak and your wife fancies fish and your mate fancies pizza or whatever, you've all catered for, and it's brilliant. And we went to one last night. It was like a work night out to one called Escape from Freight Island, and I've been before. It's in Manchester, and it's just this huge busy hall next to the warehouse project, and you've got an amazing pizza place, an amazing gyros place, Mia Rapas, which was like tortillas, and they had jerk chicken stuff there, and there's a lovely wine bar that did weak wine by the glass, which is what I'm into, and it was lovely. So it feels very, very weird to me to move away from being the epitome of that sweaty, fat, smelly basement-dwelling nerd recording a podcast on a Saturday night. I actually went out and I was around people and I was around noise. But I'm glad to be doing it again. It feels like a long time since I've recorded. It's been about a month. Just a little bit of a tricky situation, really, with kind of life getting in the way a few times and just being busy and that sort of thing. I did have a couple of lovely messages from people just asking if I was okay, and I'm absolutely fine. It's just one of those times that life just gets a little bit too busy. Things weren't really happening at sort of convenient times, and then sometimes you've just got to get going, haven't you? Get talking. I do that thing where I worry that I'm not going to have enough to talk about, but then I remember that I'm an absolute gobshite who does an hour and a half every 2 weeks to himself. He speaks to his dog, so I really don't have anything to worry about. But I am a little bit gutted that I didn't notice until just now that Passion Pro have released Passion Pro 8 for free, and there's some absolutely brilliant looking matches on that show, and I've not heard anything about it, by the way. I think only Ian Hamilton actually watches it. But let's have a look at what they put the card, because this sounded... Apologies if you can hear that, I'm just finding it. It sounds absolutely amazing. For those who don't know, Passion Pro are a Hungarian company. They're kind of like the second company in Hungary, I think. So HCW are your big one. They're... I don't know exactly. I should probably find this stuff out, shouldn't I? But I think there's a link between HCW and the Arrows of Hungary. I think that they're either linked to the training school or they own it or something. I don't know. And then Passion Pro's another one. But this has got Tiani versus Roman on it. Egor Blanc against Tamas Shabo, who was someone I was really impressed with last time I watched them. Listen to this match. Goulias Jr., BT and Smoking Aces versus Ambos. The main event is Tristan Archer versus Metahan versus Senza Volto for a belt. I mean, this sounds like a great show. Corey McRae versus Irie. I'm into that. It's up on YouTube for free. It's 2 hours, 17 minutes. Do you know I'm tempted to hit pause? No, I'm not going to hit pause. What we're going to do, next episode, we're going to do a repeat of my lowest ever ratinged episode. If that's a word. We're going to do a Hungarian deep dive. We're going to have a look at all the stuff that's happening in Hungary, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to do this show. We're going to watch whatever HCW have been up to. We're going to do a deep dive all the way across Hungary. Because I tell you something, when I last did that, I'm not exaggerating, I was looking for flights over to Hungary. I was ready to go, and I was ready to be part of it. All right, but anyway, that's in a couple of weeks' time. Let's talk about this episode. Few shows to review. We're obviously going to talk about that RevPro live live at London. I said then, very much not live at London. It was York Hall. We're going to talk about that huge show that's had some really big ramifications. It felt like a big York Hall show this time round, this Epic Encounter 2023. Because they don't always do the York Hall shows, even though they do in practice, in theory, sometimes, a few of them kind of just melt into the background. But some big title changes on this one, some big stories. Seems to be getting pretty much universal praise. They talked about it on the flagship on Thursday, and I listened to that, and they were singing its praises. I am as well, but I've got a few niggles, which a few regular listeners have probably guessed. We'll do some news in the middle because we've had some big Copper Box news. We'll take a look at Rob Reed's latest updates about attendance and ticket sales and that sort of thing. And I've kind of been putting it off, but I think we do have to touch on Money in the Bank. It's one of the biggest shows of all time in the country. I'm not going to review it match by match. I know it was a couple of weeks ago anyway, but just some overall thoughts and just some general outlines of why I think if you enjoy WWE and you enjoy their presentation, you're a massive idiot. I'm joking. Or am I? Anyway, let's get down to that London and talk about Epic Encounter 2023. One of the things I find hardest about podcasting is the transitions, like between little sections. I always want to put that little bit of music and have that little bit of a break because I like it. When Joe Lanza does his solo flagships, I like that. I don't know what it was. It made it feel good. I can't describe why, but I never really know how to do it. So I do that funny voice, and every time I do it, I think it was Sam, I think it was SM North on the Discord, who said, you remember the TMWRNJ line? Do you remember this morning with Richard, not Judy? And he said, just because you say it in a Robot Wars voice doesn't make it true. I've been watching TMWRNJ. If you don't know what that is, you have to be a proper 90s kid really to get it. It sort of came and went, and if you didn't catch it at the time, you never, that's it, it's gone. But it was this morning with Richard, not Judy, and it was Richard Herron and Stuart Lee. And I remember watching it. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old. I remember being very, very young. And, when you're at that age where you're just starting to learn some swear words, and they're just really funny. And you'd have Richard Herring, who would declare the one king on some of the episodes. It was like a panel-based, not a panel show, like a chat show kind of style thing with clips and sketches and that sort of thing. And Richard Herring would declare the one king from the show, and he'd march around saying one king, one king, one king, one king, and there'd be another one where he'd sing and he'd go fa 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 king, and it was just, this was on about 11 o'clock on a Sunday, and I was absolutely splitting my sides every time I saw it, and my mum and my grandma would sit around and they'd just go, that's not funny, Neil, it's not funny, it's immature. And there's just something about that made it even funnier to me for some reason. So, yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. But yeah, the Robot Wars voice thing. And there's another one as well where Richard Herring used to say, the perfect woman has the head of Nadia Swahala and the body of Nadia Swahala. If you either find that funny or you don't, I thought it was absolutely hilarious. I don't know what it was. They go through the Spice Girls and he'd say things like, he says, all the Spice Girls represent different types of women. Baby Spice represents women who are blonde and nothing else. They just go watch it. It's all on YouTube. It's worth it just for as Arctic Monkeys would say, it's worth it just for the opening scene because the credits were amazing. Anyway, we're going to talk about York Hall. We're going to talk about Epic Encounter 2023. I feel like sometimes I'm overly harsh on RevPro. And I think sometimes when you do something like this, you hyper focus on them, you lose a little bit of that context. And it's really important for me doing this. I think it's just as important for me to watch lots and lots of British and European wrestling. But it's just as important for me to watch other indies, watch stuff from Japan, that sort of thing, watch big stuff to give stuff context, because it's important to be able to put things in sort of the ranking, like how good are RevPro, how good are Progress, how good are WXW. And I think when you do that, you realise just how good RevPro actually are. And I think sometimes it's booked brilliantly and booked interestingly in spite of Quilden's better urges. And we're going to go through this match by match. Nobody reviews BritRest shows in as much detail as I do. And we're always going to do that. We're going to do match by match, really go through all the stories, look at the minutiae of it all. But sometimes I think I can hyper-focus on the little things. And we're going to do, by just sort of the nature of doing that. But when you take a step back, this show was an absolute breeze to watch. Now, it was 4 hours long. It was 3 hours, 50 minutes. And that doesn't include the interval. Sometimes on these RevPro shows, they just upload the live stream straight away and you've got, half an hour or whatever to sort of a break in the middle you can just skip. But this was 3 hours, 50 of back-to-back wrestling. And I've got to be honest, when I saw that, my heart sank a little bit. Because 3 hours is kind of my limit. I like my shows to be 2.5 hours. I get the fact it's York Hall. It's like, Wrestle Kingdom can be 6 hours and I don't mind. WrestleMania can be 4 or 5 hours and I don't mind. I mean, because I don't watch it. It's easy not to mind when I don't watch it. But I was a bit just the way they've been a little bit funny with run-ins and little stories that I've not really enjoyed. I wasn't sure, but the 4 hours absolutely flew by. And actually, when I'm going through, I'm going to talk about recommendations of matches, and there's certain matches that I think are must-see and certain matches that I think I would recommend if you've got time. But actually, if you have got time, if you've got an evening in and you just maybe... 10th edition Warhammer 40,000 is out, and maybe you've started a new army like I have. I've started Drukari for this edition, and you've bought a load of models against your wife's better judgment, and you just want to sit and put them together. This is the perfect show for that. And that sounds like I'm criticising it, but it's just a great wrestling show to just have on, and just it's got that kind of old school feel when you were a kid, where wrestling just seemed to happen and float over you, and you just seem to absorb it. I really, really enjoyed this show. But we've got to go through it match by match, haven't we? So let's start with the opener. So we start with the Cruiserweight Championship match, and it's Robbie X against Connor Mills. And Robbie X lost. It's really made me sit back and think about how much Robbie X has improved in this past year, 2 years, since lockdown, really. I remember, do you remember those lockdown shows? And Robbie X was basically your flippy-do guy, wasn't he? He was the guy, you go out, he'd do a load of mint flips. He was the guy that they used to put over people like RKJ. The series of matches they had played a huge part in getting RKJ to where he got to. And, his skill and his talent can't be understated. But there's just something that's happened in this Cruiserweight title run and kind of the build to it. And he's not had it. How long has he had it? He had it just shy of a year. About 9 months, wasn't it? Won it just before Christmas, I think. And there's just something about this change in him that's just been so captivating. Like, he looks so much better now. Which, it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's an aesthetic business, isn't it? He was a bit flabby, I suppose. He was a bit sort of skinny fat, I believe the kids say. But he got ripped, he got jacked, he looked really good. Shaved his head properly, that sort of thing. And the difference in him as a character, as a person, has just been palpable. He used to be somebody who didn't really have much of a character, or wasn't able to express much of a personality in the ring. He was just able to do cool moves. And something's happened that's turned it all around, and he's now able to deliver great promos. He's able to emote. He's able to react what's going on in the ring, to look shocked, to look offended, to look hurt, to look determined. Just to feel real, and he's somebody you can get behind so much easier. And I said a lot about earlier on about how York Hall shows are kind of like your change, aren't they? This is where we start to move forward and take extra steps. And I think Robbie X is going to be forgotten a little bit, but he's established himself with this Cruiserweight title run as being a special star for RevPro. Am I saying he should be a star elsewhere? I don't know. It'd be cool to see him get matches in more wider scene promotions, I guess. I don't know. But he's just done something absolutely fantastic for RevPro. And I think whatever they do with him next, I know he's going to have a little bit more weight to it, because I think he's become a star in this championship run. I really have. And I tell you something as well. So's Connor Mills. I think these are two wrestlers that are in contention for being the most improved in this on the circuit, if not the world. I think the way Mills has turned himself around this year, because he was coming off the back of that Oku story, and he could have very easily have just had that as the best thing he could do. And I was on record on this podcast of saying I really enjoyed that story. There was a few niggles with it, but overall I thought it was great. I thought it was really interesting. But what does Mills do next? What does Mills do without Oku? And it's something beautifully almost kayfabe mix about that, isn't there? Because that's kind of the story that they've been telling. What does Mills do without Oku? And actually what he's done is he's cut his hair, he's got better in the ring, and he's become an even better wrestler than he's ever been. He's become more real, he's become more believable. I'm not distracted anymore by his rubbish braids. He doesn't... I don't know what it was about them braids, and I was really hesitant to sort of go too far into it because I feel like someone's appearance is their appearance, and I'm not exactly Brad Pitt for those who see me at shows. I mean, I'm a solid 4 out of 10, I think, at best, but it just feels a little bit uncouth to criticise someone's appearance, but it's wrestling's an aesthetic business. And I don't know if it was like, if you wear a jumper and you've got horizontal stripes and you look fatter. I don't know if it was the straight braids that made him look thinner, or if he's gone away and worked out and got bigger, or a combination of the two. But he just looks so much more believable and impactful these days since he's got a proper haircut, a proper regulation haircut. I think he looks brilliant. This went straight to punches and chops, and I'm going to be into that. Mills ran out of the ring, and they just started punching and hitting each other on the entrance ramp. There was mental dives over the barricade. Robbie X bouncing around. Robbie X does not give a monkeys in a pub in the arse end of London. You put him in York Hall in front of 1,500 people, or however many people get in there these days, and he's going to absolutely smash it, and he was utterly brilliant. There was a lovely bit in this where Robbie X was on the ropes kind of outside, and Mills was just booting kick after kick. It wasn't one kick and Robbie X fell off. It was booting him and booting him and booting him to force him down onto the floor. And I think that's a Robbie X thing. He doesn't just kind of do the pro wrestling tropes where someone does a big boot so you fall off and you do it in an exaggerated way. It's all got that air of naturalness to him, that air of believability. And I just think he's fantastic. There was loads of little moments of this where Robbie X was going for his cutter. I think he calls it the exclamation point. I think he calls it, but it's just an Oz cutter. Just everyone does them. And it's the Canadian destroyer that we don't talk about, isn't it? The cutter. It's weird. It's one that it felt like we were talking about Canadian destroyers all the time, and because everyone was doing them, but we kind of let people off doing cutters, and I think they're a little bit overdone. Just as unbelievable as a Canadian destroyer. But there was a bit in this where he's, like I say, he's going to do this cutter, and you could see Mills waiting, and he countered it. He booted him in the back of the head, and you could they let you breathe that moment. And I think that's something about both Connor Mills and Robbie X that sort of happened this past 12 months, where their work has just become so much more impactful. And again, that doesn't mean a lot of these veteran wrestlers think that what it means is you've either got to work slowly like you're in a 1970s territory, or really fast breakneck indie style. And actually, we're reaching a point now where a lot of wrestlers know how to grab the best bits. I mean, they always did, didn't they? The best wrestlers always did. But these have reached that point, and it was really good. I mean, this fell off a little bit towards the middle, but then they do something like Connor Mills would boot him in his back and then clothesline him straight away in such a violent way. And Robbie X's selling is so brutal and committed and dedicated that it was so good. And it had one of those bits in matches, one of those bits where there's a pinfall and it's a kick out, and you can sense we're now into that final part of the match. And, it was lovely. This was one of those matches as well that had some very weird botches. There was a bit where Connor Mills was in the corner and Robbie X did almost a shotgun drop kick, but just literally missed, just completely and utterly missed him. And it probably should have taken me out of the match, but I felt like because they were just wrestling on the limit, they were wrestling right up until to the edge of what they could do. I kind of forgave it, I should say, because I was so captivated by the level of ambition and the level of dedication that was in it. Just a few little bits missed, like Connor Mills got the burning hammer, which is his finish, and they tried to do that thing where Robbie X rolled out of the pin rather than kicked out of instinct. But Mills was fully compos mentis. It wasn't like a desperate pin. So he just looked a little bit weird that Mills looked shocked as he was rolling really slowly out. It felt like he had enough time to react to it. So, I mean, this is the level that we're talking at when we're criticising this match. We're talking about really little things. There was a belt distraction in this. Mills got the belt, and there was a lot of drama in this match anyway. Just in the work, just in the physicality. And I thought it was really strange that they did that because it didn't add to it. And I think this is going to be a really common thread through this show. And I'm going to say this a lot about a lot of matches. That I think what Andy Quilden or whoever's booking, whether it's Ospreay, whoever, needs to do is do that classic writers thing of what does this little extra bit that I want to put in, what does it add? Because when you think about the story of this match, you've got that classic continuation of the Mills-Oku story. Yet again, you've got Mills in the opener competing for the Cruiserweight Championship. You've got Oku in the main event competing for the Heavyweight Championship. They're making a big deal all the way through this match about Robbie X desperate to beat Oku's record and to be the one who beats it. So constantly, all the way through what should be Connor Mills' moment, Connor Mills' crowning, who are the commentary talking about? They're talking about Michael Oku. And all this adds to the mise-en-scène and the feel of this match, and you know how Connor Mills is going to feel about that. And it feels like I want Connor Mills to react in a human way. And the human way would for him to be brutal like he has been, to go that extra mile with the punches and the kicks and just be that little bit more violent, that little bit more aggressive. And they chose to tell it with a belt distraction and heelish spots. And I think sometimes in RevPro they want to be, quote, creative, but their idea of creativity a lot of the time is just doing stuff. And this match and this story would have been much better served by just having a tough heel. Just by having Connor Mills kick butt. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I just think it would have been, sometimes simplest is best. And in fact, I think most of the time simplest is best. And if you're going to do something complicated, you've got to be able to justify it. And I don't think they could justify it here. And it's a shame because it just took the edge off the match. Didn't ruin the match by any stretch of the imagination. It just took the edge off it a little bit. Anyway, next up, we had Trent Seven versus Sha Samuels in an NXT UK offer match. And it's very, very hard to get excited about Trent Seven. It's very hard to get excited about Sha Samuel. And I know they asked on the flagship this week, they were talking about the Brits being grumpy, and that's true. The Irish as well. Everyone on the European scene just seems grumpy. And especially about people like Trent Seven in NXT UK. And I don't think I am grumpy. I think I give people a fair shot. They weren't talking about me, obviously, just talking generally. But the reason I find it so hard to get excited about matches like this, and the reason why I'm not overly keen on Andy bringing in these NXT UK stars, is it feels like we've kind of moved on a little bit. Like, do you remember those old Chris Brooks promos when NXT UK started signing everyone, and he'd say things like, I'm not going anywhere, I'm dedicated to the British scene, and I want to be an independent wrestler, I want to be a proper wrestler. You got Ospreay who dedicated himself to the scene, and it feels like there was a line drawn in the sand, and it feels like certain wrestlers chose one side of that line, and other wrestlers chose another side, and it just, Trent Seven so vocally chose the wrong side, so vocally chose to cross that, dare I say, picket line, And not just do it because, that old bollocks of the wanting to put food on the table. He did it so vocally and so arrogantly. The hang your head in shame tweets at Justin Sizem and that sort of thing. And now he wants to come back. And he wants to come back to a promotion that he's doing incredibly well, that is incredibly successful, despite of what him and his NXT UK friends did. In spite of what they did. And they did it through hard work. They did it through Quilden building a proper training school and pushing wrestlers like Luke Jacobs and Leon Slater and Cameron Kai and Robbie X and Connor Mills and Michael Oku, pushing them properly and pushing them well and creating good stories and putting wrestling on for wrestling fans that you could sink your teeth into. And even when I came on these podcasts and even when I came on these shows and I slagged them off to IL and I said that finish was rubbish and that finish was rubbish and that finish was rubbish and this didn't work and this belt spot was crap and this dancing spot was garbage, it didn't matter because it had heart and it had reality and it was something that was made by wrestling fans, for wrestling fans, and it was worth us sinking our teeth into. And it wasn't some garbage that he was off doing in a warehouse in Enfield. Because he wanted to put food on the table. Even though they were being paid about 18 grand a year to live in London. So don't come at me with the food on the table thing, because they were massively underpaying him. And now he's back, and Shah Samuels is back, and I'm supposed to be excited. That's why I'm grumpy. I just can't do it. It's broken that fourth wall of kayfabe for me. I can't just go, oh, Trent Seven's back. And do you know what makes it easy? This is what makes it easy. And I know it probably shouldn't be like this, and this probably makes me sound really hypocritical. But if we're really honest, if it was Pete Dunne, we'd get over it a bit quicker, wouldn't we? If it was Tyler Bate, we might get over it a little bit quicker. But it's not, is it? It's Trent Seven and Shah Samuels. They are fine. And I liked them both. I liked them both when they were on cards before NXT UK. But now, do you know what it is? And this is, you can call me pathetic all you want about this. And I know it sounds so stupid because I wrote this in a review and people laughed at me. And I kind of understand why. But I also find it to be true. It's like a partner who cheats on you, isn't it? For the RevPro fan, for me, they're like the partner who cheated. And yeah, you might get them back. You might rekindle the flame of the lost romance. But it's never going to be the same. All of these people who went to NXT UK, no matter what you do, no matter how many great matches you go on to have, no matter how many successes you bring to the scene, no matter how many tickets you sell eventually, whatever, you still went to NXT UK. He still went to NXT UK. And Trent Seven, not only did he go, he told me that we should be thankful for it. He didn't just want to go and get the money. He wanted to go get the money and get the pat on the back as well. And the applause and the fake appreciation, the fakeness that came with that era of British wrestling, like In Progress. Just the saccharine, matey bollocks. Don't wash with me. But I tell you who it did wash with. It washed with the York Hall fans because they absolutely loved it. They were cheering their heads off and, and to be fair, they had a perfectly fine match. They went out and they wrestled at a good clip and I thought Shah looked really good, and I don't mind a bit of Shah. I thought he was really good here. At the end, it was a little bit funny. Trent won with his foot on the ropes, and we know why. That kind of leads into later on, which, spoiler alert, as I'm sure you guessed, I absolutely hated. But I actually quite like the way they did this because they did it as a bit of a sporting contest. Trent Seven cheated to win, but then at the end he was like shaking Shah's hand, and obviously Shah didn't know, and he was like, "Oh yeah, fair enough, it's a fair cop, well done, mate. We had a good bit of competition there." And then at the end, the crowd were like, "No, he had his foot on the ropes," and then somebody, I assume, I assume they recorded it on the phone because they can't have had the live VOD because it never works, and they showed him a video of him with his foot on the ropes, and Shah was like, "What's going on?" And it was a little bit holiday camp, but in the best way, when holiday camp wrestling just really hits and you think, oh, holiday camp wrestling rules. It had that kind of feel to it. I just thought it was really good. I thought it was a really interesting ending, and it was 10 minutes, so probably my little grumpiness earlier on wasn't really justified, and I think sometimes maybe we just need to move on. So I've got it out of my system now, and we're going to move on, and Eurograps Express has officially moved on from Trent Seven, and we're going to give him a fair shake at the stick. I hope you're happy. Next up, we had my favourite wrestler on the scene, Luke Jacobs, come out, and he came out to an absolute raw. And again, we talked about improvements of Robbie X and Connor Mills. I think Jacobs is right there with them. In fact, I think he's probably improved even more. Just the way he walks out with the utter swagger and confidence, and he's going to go in that ring and absolutely kill himself and dedicate himself 100% to what he's doing. There's just something so captivating about that you cannot deny. You cannot help but get carried away in. And then Tom Lawler came out as opponent, and I love Lawler. He was so grimy. The USA gear. He had a shirt on with a big American flag. He had these American pants on, and it was just very, very corny, and I liked it. And you know what? This was a proper bit of wrestling. It really was. If you like a proper bit of wrestling, then this is a match for you. He's grabbing Tom Lawler's grabbing Luke's leg, twisting it round, then just booting him in the back. And what I like about Luke Jacobs' work is there's still a little way to go, but one of my favourite things about his work is he often decides to just defy what you're expecting. So there'll be like a rope running kind of spot, and he'll suddenly just do a forearm out of nowhere that just seems to take everyone by surprise. And it's not amazing work in sort of a technical point of view, I guess, but from a structured point of view, it is. And I really, really like that about him. I think it works, and it makes his matches so much more captivating because you never really know what to expect when he's doing it. And yeah, that's great. Like, that keeps you on your toes, and obviously that's fantastic. I love how Jacob struggles in these situations as well. You put him against a peer like a Jake Kidd, get me words out, against a Gabe Kidd, and it's very much them just trying to kill each other and punch each other and, go balls to the wall, just go 100 miles an hour until they both collapses. But when they put him against a veteran, it seems a little bit more paced and a little bit more like he's struggling from underneath and having to work his way up. And he always seems to tell the right story at the right time. I think that was really, really interesting. The final bit of this where they were just smashing each other, battering, pushing, and then Jacobs won in the end. And I thought this was a great match. I think this is a match that a lot of people are just going to sort of skip. They might look at it and just say, okay, Jacobs against an import. Jacobs won. He's on a push. Of course he did. All that business. But I really wouldn't if I were you. I think this was a really, really good, great match. Definite notebook easily. Next up, we had Greedy Souls against Subculture. Some more NXT UK guys. The ending of this was a massive surprise to me. I think part of this is because I've really loved Greedy Souls' work. I really have. I think they've been absolutely fantastic. And I was really shaky on them at the start. When they were doing that heel stuff and just cheating and getting themselves counted out, I was a bit like, I don't really want that. But then they turned it around and they just became a really good heel tag team. And I didn't feel like this run had come to an end. I know they've struggled to kind of build opponents in the tag team and division. It kind of gone away, but I mean, they were champs for a long time, nearly a year. But it just feels like I wasn't ready for them to lose it. Because even though they've been champs for a year, they've only had 5 title defenses. That's it. And there were some ones I really liked. Like, what was the one that was done by referee stoppage? Was it again? Yeah, when they really battered Sunshine Machine. I think that one was really good. But yeah, it just never really felt like they got going that much as a tag team. And then Subculture have won, and again, Subculture have just kind of come in, and I wonder if there's an element of Mark Andrews is a bit more of a name. I suppose Flash Morgan Webster is as well to a certain extent, and they've got a big copper box to fill, and they think it might do a little bit more. Perhaps they're going to do a rematch, maybe, that sort of thing. Maybe they knew that Subculture, because they're now the Impact champions as well, so there's a chance for that, kind of crossover and that sort of thing. I don't know. I just don't love the idea of Subculture coming in and ending this really quickly. Yeah, I don't know. Webster seemed really subdued in this one. The old Progress favourite is very different now. It seems post NXT UK. He doesn't always have that fire as much, and when he does, it feels a little bit forced. There's just a little bit of a like I say, more of a subdued nature to him. Felt a little bit slow at times. It was a good match. It was this to me was very much a gentleman's three. There was the build up to the hot tag. There was quite a few clunky moves. Like there was a bit where Mark Andrews walked over Danny Jones's back, but Danny Jones clearly got himself in position and bent over for ages. That sort of thing. It ticked a lot of boxes, but was just unexciting. And to be honest with you, the crowd were either really split or indifferent about Subculture. They don't feel like RevPro people, do they, Subculture? Maybe that's what it is. They just don't feel like they're established as RevPro guys. And RevPro's become a very unique promotion. Even though obviously everybody works everywhere. Just their weird combination of guys that they've got feels very much them. And I realised that as Brendan just tossed two of them together, I just thought I didn't want them to win Subculture. And I thought that was weird because they were wrestling as baby faces, and I didn't want them to win. I wanted Greedy Souls to keep going. Maybe that was just me. Like I said, the crowd didn't seem to really react to them very much. The ending was really exciting. It got over at the end, because proper work. It got over, and we're going to go forward and have Subculture, and I'm sure they're going to have if they could get the opponents, I think it'll be a really great run. Didn't have a screwy finish as well, which made it unique on this show. Next up, we had a 4-way women's match, and it was Windsor against Sky Smithson, against Hyan, against Danny Luna. Great to see Alex Windsor back. Obviously, my feelings and thoughts about Alex Windsor haven't been a secret. I think she's absolutely fantastic. Gutted that the injuries seem to keep popping up. It's one of those things where you got to wonder, is she unlucky, or is this just something that's going to keep happening? And it feels now you've got your fingers crossed that it doesn't happen again. And I saw she put something on Twitter about, if it basically happens again, then she's done, which I think would be a real shame. I feel like I'm going to use a phrase here that I use a lot when I'm talking about RevPro, and that phrase is not how I would have done it. Again, think about what we were saying before about that Robbie X Connor Mills match, and is this the most effective, best way of telling this story? To me, the really obvious better story was to have Danny Luna run the gauntlet, basically, because Danny Luna's been great. She's another one. Again, think of these RevPro wrestlers who just started off and they've been all right, yeah, they're decent enough, but the improvements that she's made, and she's become someone who I'm genuinely excited to see, and I think he's a genuine great wrestler. But they made her lose the title to Sky Smithson. they've involved Hyan in the mix and made it this massive weird four-way instead of just have Danny Luna beat everybody and then face Alex Windsor at the big show and have that one-on-one match between them and finally find out which of the two is the best. I think that to me would have been much more captivating. I think it would have been a better match as well, because four-ways are not good, are they? Especially these elimination four-ways. They just end up like a mess. And, long contrived corner spots that no one really cared about. Just really weird botches on the ropes and like really unusual, like clunky bits of wrestling that I think if it was just Danny Luna and Alex Windsor having a match, wouldn't have been there. Hyan was really good here, actually, and I'm not really a Hyan fan. I think she's okay. I think she has good moments, and with the right opponent, she's really good. But here, Hyan was great. Was really, really good. Very violent, very quick. It felt like, again, because it was an elimination match, it had to go into protection mode. Luna was eliminated, but it was with a chair, so we're kind of keeping her alive. Smithson eliminated herself, basically. She didn't. The Hyan and Alex Windsor pulled down the top rope and she fell over it, but it looked like she eliminated herself. So they're trying to sort of keep her safe, but she ended up just looking a little bit stupid. Windsor turned heel at the end, and we just started telling stories. And she batters Hyan, and I don't know. It's a funny one, this one. I don't know. It could work on it because it's Alex Windsor, and I think she'll be a great heel. I do, because she looked like a good heel here. It's just not how I would have done it. I just don't see. It's hard, isn't it? Because if Alex Windsor just beats Danny Luna, what do you do then? Would you have had Danny Luna win over Alex Windsor in a first match back? I mean, that's the traditional Japanese way of doing it, isn't it? You lose your first match back because you're not quite up to speed, and then have Alex Windsor on the chase and basically... Yeah, that's what I'd have done. Then do the same thing in reverse. Have Alex Windsor run the gauntlet and see if she could do what Danny Luna does, but maybe get her quite close to the end, but then have Sky Smithson beat her, and she's, I don't know, just anything would have been more interesting than, just turn a heel. And it's not bad, it's not that it's a bad way of doing it. It's just, and they're doing it well. If you're going to do it, they're doing it quite well. Like Maya Matthews came out with Alex Windsor, and she didn't see what had happened because she was dealing with Sky Smithson and stopping her interfering. And then Alex Windsor turned on Maya Matthews, who hadn't noticed that I don't know. I'd rather it was just done in a much more realistic way. And this turning heel is too pro wrestling for these kind of stories. I think sometimes it works in WWE. It can work, but just people don't turn heel, do they? People don't turn face. I think what good stories need is shades of grey, and they're not allowing those shades of grey to really sing through a lot of the time, which is a bit of a shame. But the match was okay. It was fine. It's probably what you expect. Next up, we had Zack Sabre Jr. defeated Jordan Breaks. Purpose Wrestling's own Jordan Breaks. This is such a cool match. I'm glad Breaks is getting a break. This will sound so stupid, but this is why. He came out with a water bottle that he bought from B&M or something. There's just something very real about him. He comes out looking like a bloke off the street, and sometimes that can work and sometimes it can. But Jordan Breaks has got a very, very brilliant charisma to him, where he comes out and he's like waving at the crowd and giving them thumbs up, and it's genuine. It feels like I'm watching the real person Jordan Breaks come out and have a wrestling match. There's just something I find so satisfying about this style of wrestling. I think Zack Sabre Jr. is great because he can do that World of Sport style wrestling against a lot of different wrestlers at such a high level that he can do that technical wrestling really well. But when it's two technical wrestlers together, I understand that that's a preference thing, and some people are going to be turned off by it, and I do understand that. That's absolutely fine. But I bloody love it. And there was so many times in this where you didn't know who was suckering who into the move. You know, there'd be moments where Zack Sabre Jr. would hold out the handshake. So Jordan Breaks would shake his hand. And Zack Sabre Jr. would go, ha, and sort of try and put him in a move. But Jordan Breaks knew he was going to put him in a move. So he then reversed the move. And he was things like that if you find that sort of thing really satisfying, this is as good as it gets. You know, The Observer gave this 4 stars. I'm a little bit higher because I think it's more my sort of thing. But yeah, just a really, really great match. And it's one of those matches where you watch it and you see Zack Sabre Jr. wrestle and you think, Zack, how have you not thought of all of the moves? How have you not done it? How are there still more moves? You know, there was one where he's kind of doing a camel clutch, but he's doing it with his back. Like they're topping and tailing, but back to back. And he's got his legs around his head and he's doing a camel clutch. That's what's so captivating about Zack Sabre Jr. moves is you can't even really describe them. You know, they're that good. And I was just watching going, I've never seen that before. How have you come up with that move? I want to know, but I don't want to know if he plans them in advance. I feel like once I know the answer, that'll ruin the captivatingness of it. And I don't ever want that to happen with Zack Sabre Jr. because he's probably one of my favourite wrestlers of all time. You know, I'd put him up there with anyone. Just they both get the little crawls and scratches. You know, they don't just sit in submissions. They don't give each other limbs. It felt like they were really wrestling. There was a little bit of a botch at the end. I don't know if it was a botch, where Breaks tapped, but kind of halfway through a transition, but actually ended up working. I think it felt like a little bit more realistic, more like Zack Sabre Jr. didn't realise he tapped, so wrenched in the next move, and you know, not everything has to be smooth, and it worked. Zack Sabre Jr. did a promo at the end and he said it's British bloody wrestling. And talking about Stuart Lee earlier on, he just rips off Stuart Lee. He kept going on about the Americans, you know what they're like, the Americans with their hot dogs, you know, the Americans. You know, the way Stuart Lee can repeat a word and phrase, and he's kind of ripped off his intonation a little bit, which if you're not a Stuart Lee fan, then, you know, great, but I don't think Stuart Lee is as underground as he feels when you watch him. Do you know what I mean? His whole shtick is that he's this thinking man's comedian that only about 10 people watch, but actually he sells a lot of tickets, you know, and people get his cadence and his intonation and stuff like that. So I'm not 100% sure we should be ripping him off as much as he does. Then Ricky Knight Jr. comes out. And we need to have a conversation about Ricky Knight Jr. because I've gone from having him as my tip to be a massive star, genuinely thinking he's going to be the next big thing, to have cooled off on him so badly. There's been 2 elements to this. I think one of them is injury, to be fair. He got injured and he had to drop the title. But even then, even when he had the title, he never really did anything particularly exciting with it. He didn't have that defining defense, and you could only have that first reign once. So even though at Copper Box, and we're going to talk about these matches later, but even though at Copper Box we're getting Zack Sabre Jr. against Ricky Knight Jr., and I know that's going to be a great match, if you'd have told me about that match a year ago, I'd have been frothing at the mouth. My chops would have been dripping with saliva. But now, I don't know. It's just something about Ricky Knight Jr. that I'm sure he can get it back, but he's got to get that bit of excitement back. You know, he can't just come out and attack Zack Sabre Jr. and get it back that way. We've got to see some good wrestling from him, I think. Another match was set up as well, but I'll tell you what, we'll save all the Copper Box stuff for its own section because we've had quite a lot. Next up, we had the match that you have to see. If you're only going to watch one match from this, you've got to see it. And it was Slater against Ospreay. And absolute no surprise that this match was brilliant. Absolute no surprise. It was brilliant in despite of some absolute bullshit that we'll talk about in a minute. But going in, that Ospreay is going to want to put Leon Slater over. And I feel like we're really ready to find out now, aren't we, with Leon Slater? I mean, he's like 20, let's be honest. But it feels like he's at the point now where we're ready for that big match. And if you're going to have it against anyone, it's got to be against Leon Slater. And I don't want to push these sorts of things because I know there's this thing in Brit Rest now, and people like me who are deep into the scene and talk about the scene a lot, that we get our claws into people too soon and we start pushing guys and declaring guys the next big thing too early. And I'm really hesitant to do that because I want to do that with Cameron Kai. I really do. I really want to call Cameron Kai the best wrestler of all time. And say, yeah, he's going to be the best wrestler of all time. But I don't. But there's got to be some hope there. And I think the hope, one of them, is Leon Slater. I've been thinking about structure a lot in wrestling these days. And for some reason, structure of stuff has always fascinated me. When I went to university, I did a writing at university, a lot of writing. And when I learned about the structure of films, it really made me think and fascinated by it. And I can't watch films now without thinking of those lessons. Like a 3-act structure where you set a world, you establish the world that you've got, you have an inciting incident which sends your protagonist on a journey, then there's rising action, and then something will happen, they'll maybe get some victories and things will be going well, but then things will happen that will make the protagonist have the dark night of the soul, and they'll be right down in the dumps, and they'll have the big thing that they've got to overcome, but then in the end they'll overcome it and there'll be a new resolution. And that fits like 90% of films. And I'm wondering what the equivalent of that is with wrestling. And I guess it's you have your spot at the start where, there's a bit of an exchange. Then you have your back and forth where you have control periods. Then you have that big kick out, and then you have the closing stretch. And I suppose that's the King's Road style, the New Japan style. Is it the King's Road style? No, it's not, is it? Because King Road ended suddenly, didn't it? But that's kind of like the modern New Japan style, isn't it? That's how they kind of do their matches. And we've settled on that as being a pretty damn good way of doing your matches. And I think sometimes if you deviate, and that's not a bad thing that a lot of matches follow that, by the way. 12-bar blue still works, you know what I mean? And if you're going to deviate from that, I think there's got to be a really good reason. And this match and RevPro often do deviate from that. But they didn't at the start, because the start was like a breakneck speed. Everything from Ospreay was perfect. The arrogance from him and the fight back from Slater, and we settled in and we're watching this great match. Like I say, you're watching Ospreay do things like a tope. There's things you see in almost every match, just doing them absolutely perfectly. And Slater's the same. He's perfect, but in a different way. He's almost perfect in his imperfection. How wild everything is, how everything's at breakneck speed, and because he's kind of long and gangly, you feel like you're watching limbs fly everywhere and just a wild man doing the wrestling. And incredible corner drop kick. And there were bits in this like Ospreay running away from him and Slater having to hunt him down. It was like in the Octagon when you watch those UFC clips and you've got the dominant person in the middle and someone just running around and they've got to kind of get away and reposition themselves. And they did that. It was great. There was a bit where Leon Slater countered the Ozcutter into a neck breaker, and it's one of the, just when you watch those spots of two amazing wrestlers just do something so ambitious, so athletic, so inventive and creative, but executed perfectly, just unbelievable stuff. The spin from a suplex into a stunner, then there's a bit where Leon Slater shoved Ospreay over the corner and then just leapt over it. And he does that every match, but he just did it with such speed and brutality and impact. How do they do it? How is it possible that human beings can do this? I would die if I attempted a suplex. If someone gave me a vertical suplex, I would get a stitch on the way up. I mean, what was great about this is, I loved all the safety nerds on the internet crying about the Omega match. And Ospreay's made brutal neck bumps his thing. He gave a Liger bomb that looked like he was going to break Leon Slater in half. I love it. I love it's his thing now to break your flipping neck. No one got on Twitter about that, did they, and complained about it? No, because the cool kids watch RevPro, and we know these big neck bumps are cool. A, they're brilliant, and B, they're probably not as dangerous as you think because wrestlers train the neck. And they're going to tell you it's dangerous and brutal because it's wrestling, it's kayfabe, are just nerds. Honestly, can you imagine 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you were getting into All Japan, if you're the same age as me, and you got that mixtape from Middleton Market, you went down and the guy that was selling you the Rock t-shirt when you were 12 finally decided that when you were 15 you were ready for this mixtape, and he sold it for a $5, is what happened to me, and he sold it me for a $5, and I took it home and I'm watching King's Road stuff and I'm watching Kawada being dropped on his neck. Can you imagine the sort of dork that would tut and shake his head and go, oh no, I don't like that, that's a bit dangerous. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And now we've got losers logging on to Elon Musk's Twitter.com. You've got the dorks who are logging on to that awful website and tutting and shaking their heads and going, oh, we don't want that in wrestling. Yeah, we do. We do. We want dangerous looking stuff in wrestling. Everything's dangerous. Bayley tripped up the other day and broke her leg. For God's sake. Tell you what, this match looked dangerous and it looked brilliant and I loved it. But what happened, going back to what I was saying about structure, the bits that I didn't like, there was the RevPro bump, aka the ref bump, and then a low blow. And then Gio said the boos were thunderous. But they weren't really. Like, they were just kind of there. And then Maloney came out. And I thought, why now? Why not at the end? And there was cool stuff at the end of this, and it was, but why do the running then? And it's like I was saying about the structure. It wasn't overly egregious in terms of its interference. But you've messed with that structure by having that interference. And did it make this match better or did it take it away? It absolutely took away. But then we saw the spot of the year. I've watched this spot about 15 times and I still can't work out how they did it. Ospreay did a hidden blade to Leon Slater's face as they were both leaping through the air towards each other. And I just watched it and I rewound it. And I watched it and I rewound it. And I watched it and I rewound it. I feel like Alvin Lucia. You are sitting in a room very different from the one you're in now. But I just watched it over and over and over again. And I think it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then at the end, there was a big fuss. Maloney obviously wants Ospreay. But, it's not going to happen. Ospreay's, I think, putting things in his way and they're building that match again. But Maloney looks so good. He battered everyone. He battered Ospreay. He battered Leon Slater at the end. And, I'm up for that match. I just think, why have him come out too early? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it don't bother you as much. And it didn't bother, he hasn't bothered a lot of people. You've got 4.5 stars in the Observer. A lot of people are really rating it. So, maybe I am out to lunch a little bit. But, it's very much not my thing, that sort of thing, is it? Right, main event time then. And this match, I think if you're parachuting into this match, you're probably not going to like it the way that me and you, the regular Eurograps Express listener, liked it. Because this was a RevPro story. And this is when RevPro do their stories well. We've talked about a little bit of the bollocks on this show and a little bit of, there's been times when they've really dropped the ball. But when Andy wants to tell a story and he really commits to it, he tells it brilliantly. And I'm not going to sit on the fence with this one. And some people might think this is hyperbole or might think I'm going over the top, and that's absolutely fine. I think Michael Oku is a generational talent. I think he's special. I think he's absolutely at his peak right now, and he's telling amazing stories. You get fans of certain promotions that want to talk about stories, but nobody has told stories in the ring like Michael Oku, like he's done with Connor Mills, and like he's done here. I think there's so much to dig into with Michael Oku's RevPro run. I do this thing quite a bit where I do journeys with a wrestler. So I might think, all right, I'm going to watch all of a certain wrestler's matches, maybe in a promotion or something. So I'm going to say, I'm going to watch all of Jushin Thunder Liger's matches, or I'm going to watch all the Dynamite Kids matches, or something, you can get. It's a stupid little thing that I do with, like, in the background. And I'm going to do it, I think, with Oku's RevPro run. Because there's just so much to sink your teeth into that we've got a bit of space now. And if we're honest, I think him winning the big title, I might be proved wrong with this, but I think him winning the big title is probably the end, isn't it? He's not somebody who should be champion for a long period of time. I think he's somebody who should be the chaser, isn't it? Rather than the chased, if that makes sense. But I was watching it and they were going through all these themes and it felt huge. And that's what Michael Oku can do. Better than, I think, 90% of wrestlers, 95% of wrestlers. He's incredibly small. He's good in ring from a technical point of view. He's solid. But he's just eclipses everything with this charisma, this palpable charisma that you just get caught up in, and you just get taken along with whatever it is that he's doing. He makes you feel something. Whatever he's feeling, he makes you feel it as well, and it's like I say, it's palpable, and Andy has got it over so well. Everything he's had in RevPro, he's scraped and fought for. And I didn't even realise this, but they made such a huge deal of this, that his Michael Oku's RevPro debut was a loss against Great O'Khan. When Great O'Khan was doing the Dominator thing. And O'Khan has that too. There's something about O'Khan in RevPro that feels huge because he had a proper successful excursion here. And I wrote about it, and it was boring at parts. It was, there were matches that were absolute crap for parts of it. But he's a RevPro guy. He was made in RevPro because the great wrestler he is now, the great character he has, where did he learn to be that person? Right here in RevPro. So you've got a guy that was made in RevPro, two guys that were made in RevPro, wrestling for the big RevPro championship. This was a match for RevPro, for the fans. And it starts off just little things. You've got Michael Oku looking bare in his black and white tights in the corner, looking nervous, wide-eyed like a deer. And you've got Oku stood there, the big Japanese star, the champion, resplendent in his gold, in his Balthazar gold cloak, with his hands behind his back, looking intimidating. And with I tell you what, a mirror has improved so much as well. I was ready to just boot her out of RevPro for a long time, but she's got so much better in RevPro with the way she does it. And they're talking, like I say, about Oku's journey starting with Okan beating him. He gets battered, Oku. He gets pushed from pillar to post. He gets booted over the ropes. He's constantly on the edge. He's every move Oku does felt like crash and burn. And sometimes it missed. Sometimes he even hit his own Amira, his own valet. Are they married? On the podcast, he was saying his wife. I don't know if they're married. Whatever, it don't matter, does it? His partner. Things like just Amira getting involved with Gideon Grey. It felt like if you're going to tell these pro wrestling stories with these interferences and these managers, keep it simple like this. And believe it or not, do it well, do it subtly, do it with these great. Like Gideon Grey, a generational talent. He looked like an idiot in his hoodie and his Marks and Spencer's salmon shirt, and it's perfect. This new character, Gideon Grey is getting better and better and better as the years go on. The idea now that he's this money mark who, his parents are rich and he's got that thing. Like, I don't think this is true. I think he's just a working man like everyone else. But he can play this character of, the way rich people dress really badly in a really expensive way. He just exudes that kind of energy and he's perfect. There was a bit on the ramp where Oku was doing his hand signals and Gideon Grey was doing it behind him, and you're like, you absolute dork. Do you know who should be DMing Gideon Grey? Don Callis, because Don Callis wants to do the same character as Gideon Grey, but he doesn't do it half as well. He's not got half the Rick Mail about him that Gideon Grey does. He was so good. This match has got 3 3/4 by Dave, and I know obviously Dave keeps up with RevPro to a certain extent, but he's got a lot on. But if you're invested in, he's got a lot on. I understand Dave Meltzer's got a lot on, but if you're invested in these RevPro stories, I just the desperate boots to the leg. There was old school heel stuff, like he was bullying Oku, then going into the crowd and finding the 3 people who were cheering for him and celebrating with them. And I thought this match was so good. And you could see that brilliant thing when, Oku's got the submission in the middle of the ring, and you can feel the crowd, and you can see them standing up. And when he tapped, the room erupted, and Oku stood up, and we all stood up with him. And I just thought this, if you want to look at story, forget Roman Reigns, forget the bloodline. This is pro wrestling storytelling. This is what it is. And all the baby faces coming out and celebrating with Oku. And it should have been corny. It should have been, but it wasn't. It worked. And you know the bit I loved about this? Mills came out. And no one attacked anyone yet. I'm going to pause a minute because there's a big asterisk on all of this. But Mills came out and stood there and looked at his partner. Or former partner. And there was a moment of them looking at each other. And there's almost, you could see in Mills' eyes and Oku's eyes, it's that thing of when, I don't know, like they bumped into an old partner, like Paul Simon, who's still crazy after all these years. And they bumped into them and they realised that if circumstances are different, and they could have been at this point under different circumstances, maybe they could have been happy. And there was a moment where you could tell that both of them maybe wanted to go in the ring, to hug, to shake it out. And in that moment, you realise that as much as you want that in that millisecond, it'll never work. Because Mills has been overshadowed again, hasn't he? This should have been Mills' big moment. He's won the Cruiserweight title. He's worked hard, he's been on a good run, and he's won a belt. But like always with Mills, like every single point in his RevPro career, Oku's done that one better. Mills has won the second belt. Oku's won the top one. And they just turn and walk away. And that's what I love about the Mills Oku story. It always has that dose of reality to it, doesn't it? And all that story told in a look. That's how good Oku is. That's how good Mills is. And I'm critical of Mills a lot. I am critical of him. But who can do that in wrestling? Who can do that like Mills and Oku can? Then Trent Seven came out, put the belt on Oku, but then robbed it and gave him a Rainmaker. And ran off with the belt. Whatever. Trent Seven, innit? No, forgot. We're giving him another chance. Come on, Trent Seven. So that was York Hall. A great show. I thought it was. Going over it now has made me realise how great it was, and an easy watch, and everything was good. Everything on the show was good. The worst match was probably Trent Seven against Shah Samuels, and it was 10 minutes and it served a purpose. There was a great amount of variety on it. You had the Luke Jacobs, Tom Lawler Bruise Fest. You had the Sabre Jr. breaks, sort of technical showcase. Slater Ospreay was your cut and dry match of the year candidate style of match. You had the great story match at the top. The women's match was fine. You had the cruiserweight match. Nothing was bad on this. Everything. I think this has been the best York Hall for ages. I thought it was really, really good. Probably the best one since Christmas. Just loved it. Really great stuff. So that's RevPro. Let's go on and talk about what we've got coming up at the Copper Box. So we're now up to 4 matches announced for Copper Box. And remember, they've got to sell a lot of tickets to this place. And we'll talk about tickets in a minute. We knew about Will Ospreay against Shingo Takagi. Great match. Epic match. They've also announced JJ Gale against Kosei Fujita. Because at the end of the Zack Sabre Jr. match, JJ Gale came out and reminded us all that he was the one who eliminated Zack Sabre Jr. But he said, well, actually, first of all, you've got to get through Kosei Fujita. I'm not hugely struck on Fujita. I don't know. I can't say I'm an expert on him, I have to say. But from what I have seen, I've not been hugely impressed. Probably, I think, just overshadowed by the others of his generation, really. It's apparently the new Three Musketeers. But, I think that could be an interesting match. I think JJ Gale's a great wrestler. I kind of wish he had a better opponent, to be honest with you. More for him to have a better showing. But, I think that could be okay. They've made Ricky Knight Jr. against Zack Sabre Jr. that we talked about earlier on. Again, as I said, I think what that's got to have is Ricky Knight Jr. really putting himself back on the map. And obviously, if you're going to do it against anyone, it's Zack Sabre Jr. So we'll see what happens with that one. But there's a possibility. But the match that we're going to get excited about, the match that is just unbelievable. I can't believe this is happening. Luke Jacobs against Ishii. I am so ready for that match. Because Luke Jacobs wrestles like Ishii, but just needs that little bit of that veteran kind of guidance at the minute, doesn't it? Because he's like a Beyblade. He'll just spin off into craziness and just do killer move after killer move after killer move. And what he needs to do is have a look at the way Ishii does it, the way Ishii sells, the way he lets things breathe. And that match, I'm so excited to see that match live because I genuinely think that could be absolutely brilliant. They've not made Oku against Seven official. I assume that's going to happen. They've not had anything yet for Subculture. I assume they're going to be on the show. So there's still a few moving pieces to go. But, that show, based on those 4 matches alone, is looking great. Absolutely great. So let's talk about ticket sales then. And as we've said, it's a funny one, these sorts of ticket sales. And again, this comes from Rob Reed of Voices of Wrestling, co-creator of Wrestling 101, which I'm not going to go on about again because how great it is, because it is great. At the minute, they've sold 2,354, with 4,596 left remaining. Again, he's very clear to say that this is kind of based on literally counting things, and it could be, but that's as accurate as we're going to be able to get. I don't know. I still think it's a funny one. I mean, I think really the target now is looking at 300. I think for 3,000. Another 300 tickets, which is probably more than doable. It'd be really interesting to see what that feels like in the arena and how they get it. I'm wondering if they'd have been better off just not selling anything in retrospect on that upper bowl. Even though I'm there, that's where I want to sit. I wonder if I used to work at a theatre. I used to work at the Opera House in Manchester, and if a show didn't sell enough tickets, they'd move everyone down from the gallery into the more expensive seats. So I wonder if they're going to do that just to get it looking good on camera. Because if there's anything about anything we've learned about RevPro, it's that they want to get things looking really good on camera. Anyway, that's our Copper Box update. Do we have to do WWE? What do you reckon? Should we sack it off? Because there was money in the bank, wasn't there? I'll play the music and I'll have a think about it. We're not going to do it. It was rubbish. I didn't like it at all. It opened like a rubbish episode of The Apprentice. There was a men's Money in the Bank match where the concept stinks. The concept's absolutely awful. It was there was a deep one good spot from Jake Paul of all people, but nobody does the yow anymore for Nakamura. It all felt like fake nostalgia rubbish with the LWO. LA Knight, I think, is crap, and I know that's a controversial opinion, but he's like, do you know what LA Knight is? He's like a WWE wrestler that's been designed by committee. He feels like an alien has come down from space, has got a random member of the WWE universe and asked them what a good wrestler does. And they've said, oh, well, he bobbles his head around like Stone Cold. He has a catchphrase and he sounds a bit like The Rock. And they put that into a computer and they biogenetically engineered LA Knight for him to walk out and shout, yeah, every 2 seconds. I don't like it. Loads of contrived ladder match spots I thought were rubbish. Then it was Baszler and Rousey against Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan. That match was rubbish. Baszler turned on her at the end, but wore the Eye of Horus on her tights. She came out dressed like one of Horus's children. So we know she's going to turn on her if you're not an idiot and you keep up with the Black Library. Then we had Riddle versus Gunther, which I thought was good. Then we had Mysterio versus Rhodes, that I thought was rubbish, and I have nothing to say about it. Then we had Cena coming out and just did the most saccharine, sucky up promo I've ever heard in my life, saying how he's going to fight for us to bring WrestleMania for Wembley, and everyone cheered. And I'm going to tell you something now, and I don't know if this has been said before because I skip most reviews of WWE, but it's not John Cena you've got to thank if WrestleMania comes to the UK. It's Tony Khan, because he's proved people want to go and see wrestling on that level in the UK. So if we do get WrestleMania, thank Tony Khan, you WWE idiots. Then there was a women's ladder match. I thought Bayley was okay in it. I thought Becky Lynch was brilliant in it. And I thought everyone else was rubbish. Then there was Rollins against Balor, which was rubbish. It had loads of fake laughs and people do. Oh my God! Can you imagine doing the Seth Rollins song, standing in an arena doing the Seth Rollins song along with him? There was 80,000 people doing it. Imagine. It's not a good riff. It's not even like Seven Nation Army, which annoys me on a level I can't explain. But I understand that it's a good riff and it's an earworm. It's not even catchy. It's just awful stuff. Then it was Usos against Roman Reigns. Apparently this was cinema. Do you know when people say that? Do they understand that just because something is in a film doesn't automatically mean that it's good? There are bad films. There are bad films, you know, like they exist. And if this is cinema, how would this be packaged and released? Would it get a massive opening Oppenheimer-esque weekend where you can't get a seat in an IMAX for love nor money? Or would it go straight to Netflix? Would it be free on YouTube? It's rubbish. The faces they make, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, the faces that they make. It's like the worst soap opera. It's like, if I was to compare, if I was to put it on a level of a TV show, I would say it's about as good as The Tribe from Channel 5. That was better. Channel 5's The Tribe was better than this. Michael Cole, is saying that Roman Reigns has been a great champion 1 minute and the next minute calling him a dastardly heel. He said he's got a celestial quality that's transcendent. He's a heel, he cheats to win. They don't even understand the story themselves. They're just saying stuff, and everyone's... Do you know what I can't stand? Is the way they say, universe... Oh, honest to God. Rubbish. They're talking about how that if the Usos win this match, the power of Roman Reigns is in jeopardy. How? Explain that to me. Get on the Discord, voicesofwrestling.com/Discord, find the Eurograps Express room and tell me how that makes sense. You've got, what's he called, Paul Heyman, saying they want to be head of the table. Think about your sons. What are you on about? How is this good? There is nothing good about this, and people love it. And ratings are up. Don't come at me with the ratings thing, by the way. Don't come at me with shareholder prices. If your favourite thing about wrestling is how many people watch it, you better have all of the biggest selling records in your collection. Your favourite films better be the highest. Your favourite film better be Titanic. There was loads of super kicks in this. Ironically. Yeah, so that's my review of Money in the Bank. Rubbish. You know, I've really missed doing this, and my dog hasn't missed me doing this because he's gone to bed in a sulk. As I said before, don't forget, get in the Discord. There's Eurograps Express room in there. We talk about cheese more than anything. I've had a lovely roux today. It was garlic and herb encrusted, and it was gorgeous, and I had it on sea salt and black pepper crackers. And I would strongly recommend. I'm into my soft cheeses these days. I don't know if I'm getting old. I'm waiting for some dentures. But yeah, that's what I did. Anyway, I'm definitely going to be back in 2 weeks. I'm going to keep the momentum going because, like I said, I really enjoyed this. Get in the Discord. You can follow me on Twitter if you want, at Eurograps EXP, and have a go at me on there, but I don't really check it. Have a lovely fortnight, and I'll see you soon. Hello there, my name's Neil David, and I'm the host of Eurograps Express, the podcast exclusively dedicated to the wrestling of Europe. If it's wrestling and it happens in Europe and it's good, we talk about it. Whether it's RevPro, Progress, WXW, Passion Pro, Pro Wrestling Chaos, Pro Wrestling North, we don't care, we talk about them all. If it's good and it's exciting, I want to share it with you. We're on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Check us out on the feed, check us out on Twitter at EurographsEXP, and join us for chat about European wrestling and a little bit of chat about cheese. Hopefully see you there.
Cheering at pro wrestling shows in Japan is back, and 2023 is already shaping up to be a big year in the history of pro res. That's why you should listen to the Emerald Flow Show. From the Royal Road to the Green Mat, Paul and Gerard take you into the world of All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Not only do we analyze events, but we examine business, who is getting over, what angles are working or not. Occasionally, we take a look at other Japanese promotions like DDT and Zero One. So if you're looking for more coverage of the world of Japanese wrestling, check out the Emerald Flow Show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on all of your favorite podcast apps.